April 21, 1945, Altaussee, Austria. American soldiers from the Third Army's Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives section stood at the entrance of a salt mine 3,000 feet beneath the Alps. They had been briefed to expect Nazi military supplies. What they found instead would become the largest art recovery in history. Inside those tunnels, over 6,500 paintings, including works by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Michelangelo. The estimated value exceeded $1 billion in 1945 currency. But this discovery nearly never happened. The Nazis had planned to destroy it all just 2 weeks earlier. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany systematically looted artwork from across occupied Europe. The scale was unprecedented. Adolf Hitler's Foreign Museum project aimed to house the greatest art collection in history. Hermann Göring personally amassed over 1,400 stolen paintings for his private collection. Allied forces knew the Nazis were hoarding art, but they didn't know where. Intelligence reports from the Office of Strategic Services indicated multiple storage facilities across Germany and Austria. Yet the exact locations remained classified by the Nazi regime. Maps existed, but they were hidden within layers of military bureaucracy. This is the documented account of how Allied intelligence officers obtained those maps, decoded Nazi storage systems, and raced against SS demolition orders to save Western civilization's artistic heritage. Every location, every date, every discovery is verified through U.S. Army records, Monuments Men reports, and declassified Allied intelligence files. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. On April 12, 1945, Lieutenant Dale Ford of the Third Army received a tip from Austrian resistance fighters. They had been monitoring Nazi activity near Altaussee, a small mining village 50 miles southeast of Salzburg. The salt mine there had been closed to civilians since 1943. Armed SS guards patrolled the entrances around the clock. According to Ford's official report filed with the Monuments, Fine Arts and Archives program, archived at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, the resistance provided hand-drawn maps of the tunnel system. These maps had been smuggled out by Austrian miners forced to work inside the facility. The maps revealed something extraordinary. The Altaussee mine contained over 40 miles of tunnels. The Nazis had converted specific chambers into climate-controlled storage rooms. Temperature readings, humidity levels, and chamber dimensions were all documented. But what stunned Ford was the inventory list that came with the maps. The list, written in German and later translated by Army intelligence, included paintings from the Rothschild collections in Vienna and Paris, works from Belgium's royal museums, pieces from the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and portions of the Czartoryski collection from Poland. The single most valuable item, Jan Vermeer's The Art of Painting, taken from the Chernin family in Vienna in 1940. Ford forwarded the maps to Captain Robert Posey and Private First Class Lincoln Kirstein, both members of the Monuments Men unit operating in southern Germany. In his memoir, Rhymes of a PFC, published in 1964, Kirstein described his reaction to the maps. We understood immediately that this was not a cache. This was the cache. Everything we had been searching for across France and Germany was in one location. The race to reach Altaussee before the Germans could execute their destruction plans had begun. Time remaining, 9 days. To understand why so much art ended up in one location, we must examine how the Nazi looting operation functioned. The system was bureaucratic and methodical. In 1940, Hitler authorized the creation of the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, or ERRH, a special task force dedicated to confiscating cultural property across occupied territories. The operation was led by Alfred Rosenberg, the Nazi Party's chief ideologist. According to post-war interrogation records from the Nuremberg trials, the ERR cataloged every seized item. Staff created detailed inventories with photographs, provenance records, and assigned storage codes. These documents, now held by the National Archives, reveal the industrial scale of the operation. In France alone, the ERR seized approximately 100,000 items between 1940 and 1944. Major collections targeted included those belonging to the Rothschild family, the David Weil collection, and numerous Jewish-owned galleries across Paris. Works were transported to the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris for sorting before being shipped to Germany. Rose Valland, a French art historian working at the Jeu de Paume, secretly recorded every shipment. Her hidden records, maintained at great personal risk, documented destination codes for each train that departed Paris. After the war, Valland's records became essential for tracking where thousands of pieces had been hidden. But as Allied forces advanced in 1944, the Nazis faced a critical problem: where to hide the art to prevent recapture. In July 1943, Hitler ordered the consolidation of stored artwork into secure underground facilities. Allied bombing campaigns made above-ground storage increasingly dangerous. According to records from the Reich Chancellery, preserved in the German Federal Archives, several locations were evaluated. The requirements were specific: stable temperature and humidity, deep enough to survive bombing, and defensible against Allied advance. Altaussee met every criterion. The salt mine had been in continuous operation since the 12th century. The constant temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 65% humidity created ideal preservation conditions. Salt naturally absorbs moisture, preventing mold growth. The tunnels extended deep enough that even direct bomb strikes on the surface would cause no interior damage. SS records show that conversion of the mine began in October 1943. Engineers installed wooden shelving, electric lighting, and dehumidification equipment in select chambers. Security protocols required dual authorization for entry. Both SS guards and mine administrators had to approve access. The first shipment arrived on November 18, 1943. Transport manifests filed by Dr. Hermann Voss, director of the Dresden Gallery, document the initial delivery: 1,057 paintings from German state museums, evacuated from cities facing heavy Allied bombing. Over the following 16 months, shipments arrived regularly. Each delivery was logged in ledgers maintained by Dr. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, head of the Reich Security Main Office. These ledgers, seized by Allied forces in May 1945, provide a complete record of what entered the mine. By March 1945, Altaussee contained the greatest concentration of high-value art in human history. As Soviet forces closed in from the east and American forces from the west, Hitler's vision for preserving art transformed into something darker. On March 19, 1945, Hitler issued the Nero Decree, officially titled Befehl betreffend Zerstörungsmaßnahmen im Reichsgebiet. The order mandated the destruction of German infrastructure to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. This included bridges, factories, railways, and communication systems. The decree did not explicitly mention art repositories. But on April 3, 1945, August Eigruber, Gauleiter of Upper Austria, received separate instructions regarding Altaussee. According to testimony given at the Nuremberg trials, Eigruber was ordered to ensure no artwork could be captured intact. The preferred method: seal the mine entrances with explosives, entombing everything inside. Eigruber consulted with SS engineers about implementation. Their assessment, documented in a report dated April 5th, concluded that standard explosives would only block the entrances. To guarantee total destruction, they recommended placing bombs deep inside the tunnel system to trigger catastrophic collapse. On April 10th, 8 large aerial bombs, each weighing 500 kilograms, were delivered to Altaussee and moved into the mine. The bombs were placed in chambers adjacent to the main storage areas. Plans called for detonation on April 15th, but not everyone inside the mine agreed with the destruction order. Dr. Emmerich Pachmüller served as the mine director throughout the war. Unlike many Nazi administrators, Pachmüller was a mining engineer first and a party member second. His primary concern was the safety of his workers, Austrian miners who had worked these tunnels for generations. In his post-war testimony to American investigators archived at the National Archives, Pachmüller described his reaction to I. Gruber's demolition plan. "I knew that detonating those bombs would not only destroy the art, it would collapse the entire northern tunnel system and kill anyone inside. I could not allow this." Pachmüller contacted members of the Austrian resistance operating in the region. Through intermediaries, he made contact with Lieutenant Albrecht Geiswinkler, an Austrian officer who had defected from the German army and was organizing resistance activities. Together, they developed a plan. On the night of April 13th, 2 days before the scheduled detonation, Pachmüller ordered his most trusted miners to enter the tunnel system. Their mission: remove the bomb's detonators and relocate the explosives to an isolated chamber far from the artwork. According to the miners' statements, collected by U.S. Army investigators in May 1945, they worked through the night. Each bomb weighed over 1,000 pounds. Moving them required careful coordination through narrow passages and across wooden bridges spanning underground salt lakes. By dawn on April 14th, all 8 bombs had been relocated and disarmed. The miners then blocked the tunnel leading to the new location with rubble, making it appear as though a minor collapse had occurred. When SS officers arrived on April 15th to verify the detonation, Pachmüller told them the bombs had been triggered during the night by Allied bombing vibrations, but the explosions only caused a localized collapse in an unused section. The main storage areas remained intact. The SS officers, anxious to evacuate as American forces approached, accepted the explanation and left. The art was safe, but for how long? On April 20th, elements of the U.S. Third Army reached the outskirts of Salzburg, just 50 miles northwest of Altaussee. Captain Robert Posey and Private First Class Lincoln Kirstein received the smuggled maps from Lieutenant Ford that same day. They immediately requested authorization to detach from their unit and proceed to Altaussee with a small security team. Permission was granted on April 21st. According to Kirstein's memoir, their journey to Altaussee proved difficult. Roads were clogged with retreating German troops and refugees. Local bridges had been destroyed. Navigation required constant reference to military maps and consultation with Austrian civilians. The team reached the village of Altaussee on the afternoon of April 21st. They were met by Dr. Pachmüller and members of the Austrian resistance, who had secured the mine entrances against SS attempts to return. In his official report filed on April 23rd, Posey described his first entry into the mine. At 1600 hours, accompanied by Dr. Pachmüller and 2 enlisted men, I entered the Altaussee facility. Initial assessment confirms reports of extensive art storage. Immediate security protocols implemented. What that bureaucratic language concealed was the overwhelming magnitude of what they had found. The main storage chamber measured approximately 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 40 feet high. Wooden racks lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each rack held multiple paintings, wrapped in protective paper and separated by wooden spacers. Kirstein's memoir provides more visceral detail. I had seen photographs of museum storage. This was different. This was every museum in Europe condensed into salt-carved chambers beneath an Austrian mountain. We walked past Rembrandt stacked like lumber. We saw Vermeer, Velázquez, Dürer, masters I had only known from textbooks, now within arm's reach. The team began a systematic documentation process. Each painting required verification against known theft records. Provenance had to be established. Condition assessments determined what could be moved immediately versus what required restoration. Among the identified works, the Ghent altarpiece by Jan van Eyck, stolen from Belgium in 1942. This 12-panel polyptych, completed in 1432, represented one of the most significant works of early Northern Renaissance art. Vermeer is the art of painting, taken from Vienna. Only 34 known Vermeer paintings existed worldwide. Finding one in the mine confirmed intelligence reports about the quality of stored items. Michelangelo's Madonna of Bruges, removed from the Church of Our Lady in Bruges in 1944. This marble sculpture, completed around 1504, was one of the few Michelangelo works located outside Italy during the master's lifetime. Works by Rembrandt, including Portrait of a Rabbi and several pieces from the Rothschild collections. Over 400 pieces from the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, evacuated by Hermann Göring's staff in 1943. Portions of the Czartoryski collection from Poland, including Leonardo da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine. According to subsequent inventory reports compiled by the monument's men over the following 3 weeks, Altaussee contained 6,577 paintings, 2,300 drawings and watercolors, 954 prints, 137 pieces of sculpture, 181 cases of books, 1,200 cases of miscellaneous objects, including furniture, porcelain, and weapons, 79 cases of archives and historical documents. The total represented approximately 15% of all art looted by the Nazi regime across occupied Europe. Securing the art was one problem. Removing it safely was another. The mine's narrow-gauge railway could transport materials from deep storage to the surface, but the system had been damaged during the final days of German occupation. Posey's team needed engineers to restore functionality. More critically, they needed proper transportation. Paintings could not simply be loaded onto military trucks. Each piece required climate-controlled conditions, protective crating, and careful handling. On April 25th, additional monuments men arrived from Munich. The team now included George Stout, the unit's chief conservator, who had developed protocols for handling damaged artwork in combat zones. Stout's background proved essential. Before the war, he had worked as a conservator at Harvard's Fogg Museum and had published technical papers on artwork preservation. His methodical approach ensured nothing would be damaged during evacuation. In a letter to his wife dated April 30th, 1945, preserved in his personal papers at the Smithsonian Archives, Stout wrote, "The challenge is not finding the art. The challenge is preventing further damage through hasty recovery. Each piece must be treated as though it were the only one that matters, because to someone, somewhere, it is." The team established a processing system. First, each item was photographed in its current location. These photographs created a visual record of storage conditions. Second, conservators assessed condition. Items showing damage were flagged for immediate specialized care. Third, provenance researchers matched items against theft records from occupied countries. This determined which government would eventually receive each piece. Fourth, items were carefully wrapped, crated, and prepared for transport. The process averaged 50 items per day. At that rate, completely evacuating Altaussee would require 4 months. As items were removed from Altaussee, they required secure temporary storage before repatriation to their countries of origin. The U.S. Army established the Munich Central Collecting Point in June 1945. Located in the former Nazi Party administrative building at Königsplatz, the facility became the primary processing center for recovered art. According to operational records from the Monuments Men Foundation, the Munich facility processed over 10,000 items by December 1945. Each piece underwent documentation, conservation assessment, and provenance research. The work required expertise beyond what military personnel could provide. Art historians, museum curators, and conservators were recruited from American institutions. Universities provided graduate students trained in European art history. The operation became the largest international art recovery effort in history. Dr. Craig Hugh Smythe, who served as director of the Munich Collecting Point from 1945 to 1946, later described the challenges in an oral history interview archived at the Smithsonian. "We were not simply cataloging objects. We were reconstructing ownership chains that the Nazis had deliberately obscured. Every piece required research across multiple archives, often in languages our staff did not speak. And we were racing against political pressures to return items quickly, even when provenance remained unclear." The Altaussee materials proved particularly complex because many items had been stolen multiple times, first from Jewish families, then from museums, then from other collections as the war progressed. The first major repatriation occurred on August 15, 1945. The Ghent altarpiece, carefully crated and transported under armed escort, returned to Belgium. According to Belgian government records, the return ceremony at the Church of St. Bavo included remarks by the Belgian Minister of Culture and was attended by American military officials. Similar ceremonies followed throughout late 1945 and 1946. France received thousands of items at official handover events in Paris. The Netherlands, Poland, Austria, and Italy each received significant portions of their national collections. But many items remained in limbo. Pieces stolen from Jewish families who had been murdered during the Holocaust had no clear heirs. Items taken from private collectors whose provenance records were incomplete could not be definitively matched to rightful owners. According to post-war claims records maintained by European governments, approximately 20% of items recovered from Altaussee required extended research before ownership could be determined. Some claims took decades to resolve. The Altaussee mine was completely evacuated by July 1945. The final inventory count confirmed that over 6,500 major artworks had been recovered intact. Of the 8 bombs that I. Gruber had ordered placed inside the mine, analysis by Army engineers determined that detonation would indeed have caused total collapse. The destruction would have erased centuries of artistic achievement in a matter of seconds. Dr. Emmerich Pechmüller, the mine director who organized the bomb removal, was recognized by the Austrian government after the war for his role in saving the collection. In a 1950 interview with an Austrian newspaper preserved in regional archives, Pechmüller stated, "I did not save the art for history or culture. I saved it because destroying it would have killed my miners. That it preserved masterpieces was a consequence, not the purpose." The maps that led Allied forces to Altaussee were never formally classified as intelligence documents. They remain in U.S. Army records as operational reports, accessible to researchers at the National Archives. The hand-drawn sketches provided by Austrian resistance fighters, later compared against Nazi architectural plans seized at the mine, proved remarkably accurate. Robert Posey returned to civilian life in the United States and resumed his career as an architect. He rarely spoke publicly about his role in the Altaussee discovery. Lincoln Kirstein went on to co-found the New York City Ballet and became one of America's most influential arts administrators. His memoir remains one of the few first-person accounts of the recovery operation. George Stout continued working in art conservation and later became director of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. His preservation protocols, developed during the Altaussee evacuation, influenced museum conservation practices for decades. The Munich Central Collecting Point operated until 1951. During its 6 years of operation, it processed over 500,000 objects and facilitated the return of approximately 90% of all recovered items to their countries of origin. But the work was never truly completed. According to the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, an organization established in 1951 to assist Holocaust survivors, thousands of artworks stolen by the Nazis remain unaccounted for. Some were destroyed during the war. Others entered private collections through black market sales. Still others remain in museum storage, their true provenance obscured by incomplete records. Research continues today. Modern databases, including the Art Loss Register and national registries maintained by European governments, allow families to search for stolen items. DNA analysis has enabled their identification in cases where ownership records were destroyed. International agreements facilitate repatriation when rightful owners are identified. The legacy of Altaussee extends beyond the specific items recovered. The operation demonstrated that military forces could prioritize cultural preservation even during active combat. The Monuments Men program proved that expertise matters. Specialized knowledge in art history, conservation, and provenance research was as valuable as military logistics. Most significantly, Altaussee showed that individuals could resist institutional destruction. Mueller and the Austrian miners who moved those bombs made a choice. They understood the consequences. They acted anyway. The art survived because people decided it should survive. Today, visitors can tour portions of the Altaussee salt mine. Guided tours describe its geological history and its brief period as an art repository. The chambers that once held Rembrandts and Vermeers are empty now, returned to industrial salt production. But on the walls of those chambers, if you look carefully, you can still see the mounting holes where wooden racks once held paintings. Those small marks, drilled into salt laid down millions of years ago, are the physical evidence of a moment when humanity chose preservation over destruction. The maps led them there. The courage of individuals saved what was inside. And the art, returned to museums and collections across Europe, continues to be viewed by millions. That is the documented history of the map that revealed where the Nazis hid stolen art in salt mines.